everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I will be discussing unit sizes and when you should min-max them. This has been requested a few times, so I figured it's about time I make the video. So for those who don't know the phrase min-max, it stands for minimum maximum. And in this context, it means whether you should take the minimum number of models in a squad or whether you should take the maximum number of models in a squad. A good example of this would be Chaos Cultists. Their minimum number of models in a unit is 10, but you can take up to a max of 40 models in the one unit. Sometimes it's more optimal to use all min units, sometimes it's more optimal to take the max, and sometimes there's a middle ground where you might want to settle instead of choosing between the two extremes. I will try my best to explain all the variables that go into deciding which of these options is best for the units in your army. But before we get into the content of this video, allow me to take a quick moment to let those of you who don't know that the channel now has a Patreon. If you enjoy the content and want to help support the channel, you can do so by clicking the Patreon link in the description. A pledge of $4 gets you access to the patron-only Discord channel where you can chat with either myself or any of the other Almost Pro gamers, and we're always willing to give you advice you may need when it comes to Warhammer 40k, which includes army list critiquing and general strategy advice. The community we've built is small, but still very great. Also, all pledges always go back into the channel to help create better content for you guys. So with that said, let's not keep you guys waiting any longer and let's talk about minimum squads and the reason why you would want to take minimum squads. Low leadership, or more likely to fail morale. If a unit has a low leadership with no abilities or support to increase it, sometimes it's better to take minimum squads to avoid needless casualties. For example, my Fleshhounds only have a leadership of 7, meaning if 2 die, there's a chance they can start to run away, and that chance increases with every more dead hound. So if they kill 3 Fleshhounds, which isn't very hard to do in shooting, there's a 1 in 3 chance another dog or 2 run. So I take min squads to minimize the damage done by the amount of models that run away during morale. When you're forced to use a tax unit, an example of what a tax unit is, for those of you that don't know, is when you take a brigade detachment or any other detachment and you are forced to fill up a lot of unit slots. In a brigade, you need 4 HQ choices, 6 troop choices, 3 elite choices, 3 heavy support choices, and 3 fast attack choices. Now let's say that your army has great troop choices, great elite choices, and great heavy support choices, but doesn't really have any good fast attack choices. But you have to take at least 3 of them to fill out the brigade. So because you are being forced to bring the fast attack choices, but don't necessarily want to bring them, that makes them considered a tax unit. It's the tax for getting the benefits of the brigade detachment. So for the choice of tax unit, which in this example would be fast attack choices, you pick the cheapest unit you have available and use it for all 3 fast attack slots, and then take the minimum amount of models so you can save points to spend on all of the other stuff you actually want to take. Trying to quickly fill a small detachment. Kind of like how I mentioned about tax units, if you're going for cheap and efficient, you always take the min units for a small detachment, unless you have something really big planned like a stratagem combo, but I'll get into that in a minute. For example, in most Imperium armies I've played, I like to take a small battalion of Astra Militarum for a couple extra bodies and for a cheap 3 command points. 1 Commissar and 1 Commander as the 2 HQ choices, and 3 units of Lasca and Infantry. In this example, you can't have more than 10 infantry in a squad, but even if I could add more, I wouldn't, because I want my battalion to be as cheap as possible, because it's just a cheap way for me to farm 3 command points, and I want to save the rest of my points to spend on bigger and better things for my Imperium army, like tanks, or flyers, or more tanks, and yeah, you get the point. Fitting multiple units in transports. If you're taking a list with transports and want to hide all of your good infantry in them, then you can take min squads to fit them in either small vehicles or multiple units in large vehicles. Because if you didn't know, you can fit multiple units in a transport as long as they all fit according to the transport capacity. To give your opponent more targets or more chances to make mistakes. If you give your opponent 3 things to shoot at, it makes their target priority very easy. But if you give them 20 different things to shoot at, then they might not divide their shots up well, or might get confused and target the wrong things. So an easy way to do this is to bring a bunch of min squads, and the reason you bring min squads is so that you can save points to add more min squads into your army. That about covers it for why you would take minimum squads in a game of Warhammer 40k. I might have overlooked something, and if you think I did, please let me know down in the comments. But let's continue the video, and now let's discuss reasons why you would want to take a max unit. Stratagem combos. If your army has access to 1 or 2 really good stratagems, you can build a unit dedicated to using that combo. You can only use a stratagem once per phase, so most of the time this means only one unit is going to get to benefit from that stratagem. So you can either take one max unit to always use that stratagem or stratagem combo until that unit dies, or you can take multiple max units to have the options on when and where you want to use those combos. An example of this would be Grey Knights and the stratagem Cybolt ammunition. Cybolt ammunition gives a -1 AP and a +1 strength to bolter weapons, meaning strength 5 -1 AP storm bolters. So to get the most use out of this stratagem, you want the most amount of shots possible, so you take a max unit or multiple max units of either strike squads or paladins if you plan on doing this stratagem every turn. This gives you the most bang for your buck when using stratagems. High leadership or morale immune. In some armies there are units that have a ridiculously high morale, so the chances of them fleeing are smaller. An example of this would be Necrons. Other armies have access to buffs that make their units immune to morale like Astra Militarum or Chaos Space Marines. In this instance, you can max out on your screen units to make a much more efficient screen or blob. Another example of something like this would be Orcs and how their leadership works off of how big the squads around it are. So you're incentivized to bring max squads of boys and storm boys so that way they can feed off of each other's leadership. If you want a good screen, sometimes it's efficient to have 1 or 2 or 3 max screening units instead of 2, 4, or 6 minimum screening units, and here's why. In the ITC format, which is always what I'm addressing when I make these competitive guides, is played with kill points, and one of the kill points is awarded to the player who kills the most units in that battle round. So let me give you a quick example. You can have 3 units of 10 cultists lined up in front of your deployment as your screen. On turn 1, they all get charged and die, giving up 1 point for dying, and possibly another point if you don't kill more than 2 units on your turn, since they killed 3. Now if you had 40 cultists instead conga lined in front of your army and your other screening units, even if all 40 die to either the combat or morale, it only gives up 1 kill point and only 1 unit towards your opponent's total amount killed, meaning you have a better chance to kill more than them on their turn now. It's a very small points difference for the score, but in really competitive games where both players are evenly matched, those couple of points can be the difference between victory or defeat. When you want to have more wounds in your unit to protect better models with better weapons. In this edition of Warhammer 40k, you get to pick which model dies in your own unit when they take casualties, so this means you can always save your better weapons or upgrades for last. An example of this is a Space Marine Devastator squad. You can only take 4 heavy weapons in the squad, but you can take another 5 more Marines in the squad alongside the Sergeant for a max of 10 models. This means your opponent has to get through 6 wounds before they have a chance to kill a heavy weapon. But remember to consider morale and leadership when maxing a unit and figure out if it's optimal or not. That about covers the reasons for why it would be optimal to bring max squads. So now let's cover the in-between and why you would want to find a middle ground for the number of models in a unit. When you're trying to fill up points, if morale isn't going to be an issue, then you can always throw in an extra model or 2 if you can afford it. Always try to end your army list as close to the maximum as possible if you can. When you want to have more wounds in your unit to protect better models with better weapons. I know I mentioned this in the reasons to max a unit, but it's also a reason to only take a few extra models as well, so I included it in both. The example I gave earlier was Space Marine Devastators and taking a max squad of 10 Marines. Personally, I think that's too many points wasted on extra wounds, and personally like to only take 2 to 3 extra guys because I'd rather spend the points elsewhere. Plus, it makes morale less of a problem too, but it's still nice to have a couple of extra bodies to jump in front of the bullets for my heavy weapons. So I added a few extra guys and his bullet sponges. I think that about covers everything, and you should now have a good understanding of when to min-max your units, or even when to just add a couple of extra models. If you think I forgot anything, please let me know down in the comments and I will make a pinned comment addressing all of the things I forgot like I normally do. So anyways, thanks for watching guys, I hope I was able to teach you something and I will see you in the next video. Happy wargaming!